Hey, welcome back to Legal AF and Court Accountability Action. I'm going to do part 2 of a conversation with you all about the Department of Education and the attacks on the Department of Education. But this time I want to talk about a little bit about some of the personalities involved and how personnel is policy. So as many of you know, the person that Donald Trump has nominated to become the Secretary of the Department of Education is a woman named Linda McMahon. She is someone who has been at the helm of the World Wrestling Federation, of this entertainment channel, basically, that has its roots in the U.S. and is really a global entertainment network about sort of theatrical wrestling. This is not Olympic wrestling. This is not the wrestling that kids participate in high school competitions. This is theater. This is by people who are athletes, but it's a form of entertainment. And so it really is in some ways a real puzzle why any president would choose someone to head the Department of Education who does not have experience, as an educator, as a teacher in public schools, or more, who has not played a role in the administration of public schools, secondary, primary schools, high schools, or public universities, but rather someone who hails from the entertainment industry. The answer to that question is really because Linda McMahon is a major fundraiser for the Republican Party and for Donald Trump. This is the type of thing that he did last time around when he chose Betsy DeVos, another major right-wing funder, for this important realm of control at the Department of Education. In this instance, we have someone who has not just led this entertainment industry, anchor industry, in essence, of worldwide wrestling, but who also has had some challenging experiences with her husband's behavior as the co-leader of that corporation in terms of his scandals. But she's someone who has also had political ambitions for a long time. She's run for U.S. Senate in Connecticut before. She was previously appointed for a brief period to the Connecticut Department of Schools. She resigned because there were prohibitions on doing fundraising work along with that very serious role of helping to manage the public schools of Connecticut, which are, some of the best schools in the country. During the process of that appointment, it turned out that she had not been honest about her educational background. She had claimed that she had a degree in education. If you hear this claim repeated, make a note of it, because in fact, she doesn't have a degree in education. She didn't major in education. She majored in French, which is fine. You can major in French, get a certificate to teach French. That's perfectly fine. That is not the same as being trained in being a teacher in the methods of learning for kids. The very, very many different ways that kids learn in terms of, a hands-on learning, or learning by listening, or by watching, or by doing. It has nothing to do with having any expertise whatsoever in how to educate kids. So now we have someone who is being named to head the Department of Education, whose primary majority experience is in running an entertainment industry, and who doesn't have any experience actually as a public school teacher or public school administrator in any way. So Linda McMahon, was a previous appointee by Donald Trump when she was in the first Trump administration. She was the head of the Small Business Administration, the SBA group within the federal government. That was her role. Again, it was an interesting role since she actually didn't run a small business or have experience running a small business. She was running and helping to run a major entertainment operation through this World Wrestling effort. And now she's back, and she's been named to head our Department of Education. What's she doing there? I mean, in some ways, this is sort of an empty suit situation, like a number of the appointees of Trump seem to be, where they are just there to do his bidding. They're not there to be necessarily loyal to the institutions that they're being tasked with managing. And in fact, there are news reports that Linda McMahon, if she's confirmed, will be asked to provide a plan for dismantling the department that she will be overseeing. These are sad days to see people like this who don't have, I think, what most people would consider to be genuine, legitimate qualifications for those roles being nominated. Obviously, we've seen what's been happening with the Senate confirmation efforts around Bobby Kennedy, whose experience and $500,000 salary is based in part on telling people to be afraid of vaccines despite their proven efficacy. We can see that in other nominees. I'm not going to go through them all. We've talked about a number of them on this channel. But this instance of putting someone who is an entertainment CEO in charge of our education system, I think is another, reckless and irresponsible act, bad judgment, basically, which we've seen plenty of. But that's not all. I think it's also worth thinking about who Trump chose the first time around. He chose Betsy DeVos. Betsy DeVos is someone who she wrote an op-ed actually in The Hill, which is a local newspaper in Washington, D.C. for The Hill, for Congress, in which she, back in, I think it was 1999, so it seems like a long time ago, almost 25 years ago, when the DeVos family was one of the biggest funders of the Republican Party. That DeVos family money comes from the Amway fortune. Those are those pots and pans that were being sold door to door in this sort of not an illegal pyramid scheme, but a scheme where people above the salespeople and above the salespeople and above the salespeople would get money for this sort of pyramid-like structure. So Amway made a fortune selling pots and pans door to door. Betsy DeVos actually married into that family. She actually comes from the Prince family. That's Prince family. And they made their own fortune in Detroit, providing components for automobiles. And her brother is Eric Prince, who I'm sure you may have heard of, who runs a sort of military contractor operation abroad and has been closely aligned with Trump. And with sort of this soldier of fortune type of operation of providing non-governmental military forces and getting rich from it. So Betsy DeVos herself never went to public schools. She went to purely private schools. She was, raised in this very wealthy family and then married into this other wealthy family, the Amway fortune family. And in 1999 or 98, when they were being assailed by how much money this one family was injecting into our politics, she wrote this op-ed in which she basically said, yeah, and we're proud of it, and we want a return on our investment. You betcha. That's why we're putting money in. So then fast forward to 2017, when she's nominated to head the Department of Education, and she'd given a bunch of speeches over time with her husband, Dick DeVos, and those speeches were attacks on public schools. She was also funding efforts in Michigan to push more money into charters and other so-called public school alternatives. There was a major expose in the Detroit Free Press about a decade ago talking about the failure of that public policy in Michigan, how the performance of kids in those schools was not an improvement over public schools, how much money had been wasted, how much had been lost to fraud, and on and on and on. But when I was looking into Betsy DeVos as part of that nomination, one of the things I found was that she and her husband had given a speech to or a conversation, basically, to a religious group called The Gathering. And at that event, in essence, she was talking about how, and Dick DeVos as well, we're talking about how they didn't oppose public education. What they opposed was public schools. So let's unwrap that for a second. What does it mean to oppose public schools but not public education? It means you want the money. It means you want the public tax dollars to be directed as you wish to what you want, and not to genuinely public schools, universal public education that provides access to kids of all backgrounds, no matter their family's wealth, provides support for kids with disabilities. Instead, they want that money, public education, to go into whatever they want, which is predominantly private religious education. So at this gathering, where she and her husband were being interviewed by the minister or the pastor, he asked them, you two are really rich, basically. I'm going to paraphrase here. Why can't you just fund private schools? the private schools that you want. You've got billion-dollar fortunes, basically. Why not just fund it? And they said they didn't have enough money, basically, to fund the purely private education, religious education that they wanted. That we, really need to. They really needed access to public funds in order to accomplish their agenda. Well, what is their agenda? In that same interview, Betsy DeVos talked about how she was upset that she and her husband had this conversation together, so it's both of them, upset that the public schools had supposedly displaced churches as the center of communities. Well, first of all, that's not true. Second of all, the Constitution is a secular constitution. It does not establish a religion. It does not set churches as the center of American communities. It, in fact, it bars the establishment of religion, and it bars religious tests for office, it bars religious oaths of office. And so you had, or the idea that you'd have to pass a test in order to get public office. So you have this billionaire who has this completely distorted version of history. And that billionaire family is basically attacking our public schools, attacking the public school system, trying to direct as much money as possible into purely private schools, predominantly to support private religious indoctrination at our expense, basically taxpayers subsidizing private religious indoctrination. And then in this same interview, she and her husband went on to talk about how they had gone on a trip to Israel. And as part of that, as Christians on this trip to Israel, they had learned about how archaeologically you could see the history of Israel based on what types of materials were in the trash. And that when people who were not of the Jewish faith were leading Israel, there were pig bones. That's what she said. There were pig bones in the trash. And so what they wanted to do, and I can't believe I have to say this out loud because it was just so shocking when I read it. They view their mission in America as to remove the pig bones from American society, the times in which American society has not been dominated by religious control, by a particular religious control. So Betsy DeVos, did not actually dismantle the Department of Education when she was there. She did not fulfill that agenda, but she did do a lot of damage in a lot of ways, including expanding that effort to redirect more funding to public schools. But now here we are in 2025 with a new potential leader of the Department of Education in Linda McMahon, at least the suit in charge of Department of Education. But behind the scenes, of course, the power is Donald Trump and Elon Musk and that Project 2025 agenda, where they have described the goal of these right-wing groups of basically destroying the Department of Education and putting money, reducing the money coming from the federal government and having more of our money, more of our tax dollars go into subsidizing private religious indoctrination. So that's just a quick update, a snapshot of the two people that Donald Trump has tapped to lead the Department of Education, what their background is, and what their agendas have been. And I think knowledge is power. We've got a lot of work to do to really protect our public schools, to make sure that our public school teachers are well paid, that our kids get excellent public education, universal education, and that we really expose and confront and oppose this effort to tear down the vital institution in America of public schools. So thank you so much for joining us here on Legal AF and Court Accountability Action. We are almost at 450,000 subscribers. Please subscribe, please share, please spread the word. Help us get this information and other information out to people as we come together to really defend our institutions and our freedoms and help make America better by opposing this extremist agenda. So thank you so much.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.